Welcome to my channel Spookiz Stories. There's something haunting about the silence that lingers in forgotten towns. I've walked down roads where time stood still, houses sinking into the earth, whispers carried on the wind, and stories buried beneath layers of dust. These aren't just ruins, they're memories, frozen in Ohio's soil. Each ghost town hides a piece of someone's life, laughter, pain, love, all left behind. Tonight, I'm taking you on a journey through places where the living once thrived and the dead never truly left. Welcome to Ohio's most chilling ghost towns, where the past still breathes in the dark. If this story gave you goosebumps, show some love, like the video and subscribe for more real haunted tales. Number 1, Moonville, Vinton County, Ohio. I still remember the first time I drove through the thick woods of Zaleski State Forest, the road narrowing until the trees swallowed the last bit of daylight. I had come searching for what people here call the ghost of Moonville. Locals warned me that the place wasn't easy to find, and they were right. The GPS stopped working halfway, and the silence around me felt heavier than the air itself. When I finally saw the old railroad path, my headlights caught a stone tunnel buried deep in the forest, the only thing left of Moonville, a town that died more than a century ago. The tunnel looked ancient, carved out of stone and soot, its black mouth swallowing the light. I parked the car and stepped out. The air was cold, and the sound of my own footsteps echoed down the tracks like whispers. As I walked closer, I couldn't help but think of the stories. In the late 1800s, this tunnel was part of a rail line that carried coal and supplies through the region. Moonville had been a small mining town, just a few homes, a general store, and a saloon. But one night, a train worker, some say a brakeman, was struck by a train while crossing the tracks in the dark. Since then, travelers have reported seeing a dim, swinging lantern deep inside the tunnel, as if the man still walks the line, searching for a train that's long gone. I stood at the entrance, my flashlight flickering weakly. For a moment, I thought I saw a faint glow inside, hovering midair. It swayed gently, like someone walking. My breath caught. I whispered, "Hello," but only the wind replied, whistling through the tunnel. The light faded slowly, until the darkness was complete again. I can't say what it was, maybe a trick of the eye, maybe not. But I know what I felt. It wasn't fear. It was sadness, the kind that lingers in places time has forgotten. When I left Moonville that night, I kept looking back in the rearview mirror. The forest stood silent, hiding its secrets. But as I turned onto the highway, I noticed something strange, a small light flickering behind me on the old tracks. It looked like a lantern, swinging gently in the dark. Some people say the ghost of Moonville only appears to those who walk alone. I don't know if that's true. All I know is, when I think of that night, I can still see the faint glow of that lantern, and I still wonder if someone, or something, was trying to find its way home. Number 2, Boston Mills, Helltown, Summit County, Ohio. I had heard the stories my whole life, whispers about a place called Helltown, where roads twist through the woods and the silence feels alive. Most people in Ohio laugh it off, calling it just another urban legend. But one cold autumn afternoon, curiosity got the better of me. I wanted to see Boston Mills for myself. The drive there felt ordinary at first. I passed through quiet suburbs, then farmland, and finally the trees started to close in. A faded sign read, Boston Township. The road dipped into a hollow, and suddenly everything changed. Abandoned houses stood like broken teeth along the roadside, their windows boarded, their yards overgrown. There were "No trespassing" signs nailed everywhere, not the kind meant to scare kids, but old, rusted ones that felt like warnings. I parked near what used to be the center of town. The silence was unsettling, no birds, no wind, just stillness. Boston Mills was once a small, peaceful community, founded in the early 1800s. But in the 1970s, the government forced residents to leave after declaring the land part of a new national park. The official story says homes were bought out for conservation. Locals believe something else drove people away. I walked down a cracked road that led deeper into the forest. Some said there used to be an old church here, where strange rituals were held after dark. Others claimed to have seen ghostly figures standing on the old bridge, or heard the cries of a child near the cemetery. I wasn't sure what to believe, until I reached the end of the road. The forest was thick, the air cold. That's when I noticed it, a faint smell of smoke, like wood burning somewhere nearby. I turned around, and through the trees, I thought I saw a dim orange light flickering. It looked like a fire, but too far away to be real flame. I stepped closer, the leaves crunching under my feet. Then, just as I reached the edge of a clearing, the light vanished. I stood there for a long time, listening. Somewhere deep in the woods, a branch cracked, slow, deliberate, like someone was walking. My pulse quickened. I whispered, "Is someone there?" No reply, only the sound of my own heartbeat. When I finally made it back to my car, the sky had turned gray. I glanced in the rearview mirror and froze. Behind me, at the end of the road, stood a small white house. I swear it hadn't been there before. One of its windows was glowing faintly from inside, as if someone was home. I didn't stay to find out. As I drove away, I looked back one last time. The light was gone. Only the trees remained, and that hollow silence, like the whole town was holding its breath, waiting for someone else to come looking. Number 3 Utopia, Claremont County, Ohio. I had always been fascinated by places with names that don't match their reality. That's what drew me to Utopia, a small riverside town in Claremont County, Ohio. The name promised peace, perfection, but what I found there was something entirely different. The road to Utopia runs along the Ohio River, quiet and lonely, lined with old trees and forgotten houses. I reached the place just before sunset. The sky was glowing orange, and the air carried that heavy stillness that always seems to come before something strange. There's not much left of the town now, just a few brick foundations, a handful of mailboxes with no homes behind them, and a sign that says Utopia Road. It felt ironic. Back in the 1840s, this place was founded by a group of spiritualists who believed they could build a perfect community here, a heaven on earth. But that dream didn't last long. Floods came. The Ohio River rose and swallowed everything. Dozens died in the icy water, their homes torn away overnight. Some say their spirits never left. I parked my car near what used to be the old settlement and started walking toward the river. The sound of flowing water echoed in the distance. There were no people around, no voices, just the soft rustle of leaves and my own footsteps. For a moment, I felt like I had stepped out of time, like the rest of the world had stopped moving. As I reached the riverbank, I noticed a faint light flickering near the water. It looked like a candle, glowing weakly in the wind. I thought maybe someone was camping nearby, but when I called out, no one answered. I walked closer, and the light suddenly went out. In its place, I heard something, faint, like distant singing. It was soft, almost beautiful, but the words were impossible to understand. It came from the direction of the river. I stood there, frozen, listening. The sound rose and fell with the breeze, like voices carried over water. For a second, I thought I saw shapes, pale outlines moving beneath the surface, drifting just under the ripples. I blinked, and they were gone. The river went silent again, leaving only the reflection of the moon on the black water. When I turned to leave, I noticed something carved into a stone by the bank, a single word, barely visible under the moss: believe. Maybe it was left by one of those settlers long ago, still hoping for a paradise that never came. Driving away, I looked back one last time. The place was quiet again, just a shadow beside the river. But part of me couldn't shake the feeling that the people who built Utopia never really left. They're still there, still waiting for the perfect world they were promised. Number 4 Tadmor, Montgomery County, Ohio. I remember the first time I heard about Tadmor. Someone at a roadside diner mentioned it, a town that simply disappeared after the river took it away. They said, if you walk the old trails near Taylorsville, you can still hear the trains that never came back. I didn't believe it, but I had to see for myself. It was late fall when I finally found the path. The air was cold and sharp, the kind that makes your breath visible. Taylorsville Metropark looked peaceful enough, trees standing still, leaves carpeting the ground, the great Miami River moving slowly beside me. But the deeper I walked into the forest, the quieter it became. It was as if the world around me had gone still, waiting. Tadmor was once a thriving canal and railroad town. In the 1800s, it was one of the few places in Ohio where riverboats, railroads, and canals all met. People came from everywhere, merchants, travelers, workers. But after repeated floods and a devastating storm in 1913, the river changed its course, and Tadmor was left to die. The rail line moved, the canal dried up, and the town simply faded from the map. As I walked, I found the remains, the old bridge foundations, stone walls hidden beneath vines, and a broken lock gate half buried in mud. Standing there, I tried to imagine what it must have looked like when life still moved through this place, children playing by the water, the sound of train whistles echoing through the valley. But all that's left now is silence. Then something strange happened. I heard footsteps behind me. Slow. Heavy. I turned, but no one was there. I called out, thinking maybe another hiker had wandered off the trail, but only the river replied. The sound came again, this time closer. It was like boots on wet earth. My heart started pounding. I walked faster, following the path toward the old canal bridge. Just as I reached the crossing, a low rumble filled the air. It sounded like a train, distant at first, then louder. The ground seemed to tremble under my feet. I froze, staring at the empty tracks ahead. There was no train, no light, nothing. But I could hear it, the whistle, the wheels grinding on rails that weren't there anymore. And then, silence. The sound stopped as suddenly as it began. The air felt thick, like the world was holding its breath. When I finally made it back to my car, the forest had gone dark. I looked back toward the trail, and for a second, I saw something, a faint lantern light moving slowly along the old rail line, swaying from side to side, just like an engineer checking the tracks. Then it faded into the trees. They say Tadmor is gone. But standing there, I couldn't help but think, maybe some places never really vanish. Maybe they just wait for someone to remember them. Number 5 Vinton Furnace, Vinton County, Ohio. I still remember the first time I drove down the winding roads of Vinton County. The map showed a faint label, Vinton Furnace, deep inside the forest, miles away from any main road. Most people told me there was nothing left to see there, but that's exactly what drew me in. I wanted to see what remains of a place that time itself had forgotten. When I reached the old trail, the air felt heavier. The trees pressed close on both sides, their branches hanging low, whispering in the wind. I parked my car and walked the last half mile, following a path covered in moss and cracked stones. That's when I saw it, the ruins of the old iron furnace, blackened and silent, half swallowed by the forest. They say Vinton Furnace was once alive with the sound of metal, hammering, shouting, smoke filling the sky. In the 1800s, hundreds of men worked here day and night, melting iron ore from the hills into something useful, something strong. But when the ore ran out, so did the life of the town. One by one, the workers left, the fires died, and the forest took everything back. I walked closer and touched the cold stone wall. It was rough and damp, like it had been crying for years. The strange thing was, as soon as my hand rested there, I could swear I heard a faint clang, metal striking metal, echoing somewhere deep inside the ruins. It was distant, rhythmic, almost like someone was still working the furnace below the ground. I stood still. The wind had stopped. The forest was silent. But that sound, that slow, steady hammering, kept coming from within the walls. I followed it, every step echoing louder until I reached what looked like a tunnel entrance, half buried in soil and leaves. I leaned forward, shining my flashlight inside. The air was thick, and I could barely see beyond a few feet. But what I saw made my heart freeze. There were footprints. Fresh ones. Leading deeper into the dark. I called out, "Hello? Anyone there?" But no voice came back. Only that hammering sound, slow and tired, like someone who'd been working too long. I took a step back, the light trembling in my hand, and then it stopped. Total silence. I turned and walked away as fast as I could, but before I reached the car, I heard it again, one final strike. Clang. It echoed through the forest, cold and hollow. They say at night, when the fog settles over Vinton Furnace, you can still hear the men at work, ghosts of the ironworkers, hammering away in the dark, waiting for the day someone lights the furnace again. Number 6 Oraton, Jackson County, Ohio. The road to Oraton isn't marked on most maps anymore. You have to follow a forgotten stretch of dirt that cuts through Jackson County's rolling hills, a place where GPS loses signal, and time feels like it never moved forward. When I first set out to find it, the locals at a nearby gas station gave me a strange look. One old man said quietly, "You'll know you're close when the forest goes quiet." He was right. After a few miles, the sound of the world faded, no birds, no crickets, not even the rustle of wind through the trees. Just silence. And then, from behind a curtain of vines and broken trees, I saw it, what was left of Oraton. Oraton was a mining town in the late 1800s, built around a coal operation that promised jobs, hope, and money. But like many towns of its kind, the dream didn't last. The mines closed after an accident that killed several workers. They said the tunnels collapsed during a night shift. The bodies were never recovered. Soon after, the families left, and the town fell into decay. I parked my truck on a patch of gravel that might have once been a main street. The skeletons of a few wooden houses stood crooked under the weight of moss and time. The air smelled like damp earth and coal dust. I walked toward the entrance of what looked like the main mine shaft, a black hole in the side of a hill. The wooden beams above it were cracked, but the rusted sign still read, Oraton Mine Number 3. I took out my flashlight and stepped closer. Every breath echoed inside, like the tunnel itself was breathing with me. About 20 feet in, the light caught something, old mining tools scattered across the ground, helmets with shattered glass, and a set of rail tracks disappearing into the dark. That's when I heard it, a low hum, like a whispering wind moving through the shaft. It was faint, but it had rhythm, almost like voices. Men talking in the distance. I turned off my flashlight for a second, trying to listen. The darkness pressed against me, thick and alive. Then came a single sound, the sharp ping of metal hitting rock. My stomach dropped. There was no one here. The air grew colder. My breath turned to mist. I backed away slowly, every instinct screaming to leave. But as I turned toward the exit, I caught one last thing, faint lights flickering deep inside the tunnel, moving like lanterns. Then they vanished, and the whispering stopped. When I stumbled back outside, the forest had gone completely still again. I looked back once more, and I could swear I saw a figure standing at the mouth of the mine, not solid, but shimmering, like smoke. Watching me. People in Jackson County still say that on quiet nights, if you walk near Oraton's old mine, you can hear the miners calling to each other, still trapped beneath the earth, still waiting for rescue that never came. Number 7 Mineral, Athens County, Ohio. The first time I went to Mineral, Ohio, I almost missed it. Hidden between dense trees and narrow country roads in Athens County, it didn't even look like a town, just a few crumbling stone foundations scattered across the hills. The map said Mineral, but what stood there now was a ghost of what used to be. It was late afternoon when I arrived. The sun was already dipping behind the ridge, washing the forest in orange light. There was something strange about the silence there, not peaceful, but heavy, like the land itself was holding its breath. Mineral began as a coal mining settlement in the mid-1800s. Dozens of families lived here once, their lives tied to the deep tunnels carved beneath these hills. When the mines closed after a methane explosion in 1888, the town began to die. The company pulled out, families packed up, and by the early 1900s, only a handful of homes remained. But people still whisper that not everyone left. I parked near the old church, or what was left of it. Its steeple was gone, the wood eaten by years of rain and rot. Only the stone steps and part of the bell tower remained. As I climbed those steps, I noticed something odd. The bell wasn't there anymore, yet faintly, I could hear the sound of one ringing in the distance. A single chime, carried on the wind. I walked down the dirt path that led toward the mine's old entrance. The forest had almost swallowed it, thick vines, moss, and fallen branches covered the way. But the tunnel was still there, a black scar in the hillside. The closer I got, the colder it felt, like the air itself was warning me not to go any farther. I stood at the entrance, flashlight in hand. Inside, I could see abandoned tracks curving into the dark. Then I heard something, faint footsteps echoing deep inside, slow and steady. For a moment, I thought maybe someone else was exploring. I called out, "Hello." My voice bounced off the walls, but no one answered. The footsteps stopped. Then, out of nowhere, came the low sound of men's voices, faint, distant, and overlapping. It was like hearing a conversation from a different time. I could make out a few words: gas, light, careful, and then a sudden crash echoed through the tunnel. My flashlight flickered, and I saw dust falling from the ceiling. I didn't wait to see more. I turned and ran, the air behind me growing colder with every step. When I finally reached the clearing, I looked back once. The tunnel was still. Silent. But that bell sound came again, one long, drawn-out chime, fading slowly into the night. Locals say the bell of mineral rings whenever the spirits of the miners walk. They say the men who died in that explosion never left, they still gather underground, waiting for the shift to end, waiting for someone to ring the bell that once called them home. Number 8 Hope Furnace, Vinton County, Ohio. It was almost sunset when I finally found the Hope Furnace. I'd been driving for hours through the twisting backroads of Vinton County, guided only by an old map and the faint promise of seeing what was left of Ohio's iron past. When I reached Lake Hope State Park, the forest around me had already started to turn golden, the light flickering through the trees like fire. And then I saw it, standing silent and proud near the edge of the woods, the towering stone furnace. The structure was massive, built from thick, dark blocks, its arched mouth blackened by a century of smoke and memory. It looked like something ancient, something that shouldn't still exist. The furnace dated back to the mid-1800s, when the town of Hope was alive with the sounds of industry, miners, blacksmiths, and workers who turned raw ore into iron that built cities far beyond these woods. But when the iron ran out, the men left, and Hope vanished. Today, only the furnace remains, surrounded by ghost stories and the whisper of the trees. As I walked closer, I felt a strange stillness. The air was cool, but not empty, it felt like it was watching me. I placed my hand on the stone, cold as ice despite the fading warmth of the sun. The surface was rough, scarred with age. For a moment, I closed my eyes, trying to imagine the fire that once burned inside, a roaring heart of molten light. But then, I heard it. A faint clang. It came from deep within the hollow mouth of the furnace. I froze. The sound was followed by another, slow, rhythmic, metallic, like someone hammering iron far underground. I shone my flashlight inside, but there was nothing. Just darkness swallowing the beam. I took a step back, my chest tightening. Then I noticed movement, a flicker of orange light, deep inside the furnace. It looked like firelight, faint but real, glowing from within the old stone belly. The air grew warmer around me, the smell of smoke suddenly thick in my nose. I blinked, and for half a second, I saw them, figures moving near the light, silhouettes of men working the forge. I stumbled backward, my pulse pounding. The light vanished as quickly as it appeared. The air turned cold again. The forest went dead silent. Later, when I asked a park ranger about it, he only smiled and said quietly, "You're not the first to see the fires." He told me locals call it the eternal shift, the belief that the spirits of Hope's workers still return to the furnace at night, relighting the flames that once gave their town life. And if you stand near Hope Furnace long enough, just after sunset, you might see it too, a faint glow from within the stones, and the echo of men still working, still forging iron in a town long forgotten by time. Number 9 Clay Lick, Licking County, Ohio. I didn't even plan to stop in Clay Lick that day. I was driving through Licking County, following an old river road that twisted alongside the creek. The name Clay Lick showed up on my paper map in faded letters, almost invisible, but something about it pulled me in. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was something else. The road narrowed into gravel, the trees thickening until they almost touched above my car. Then, the forest opened, and I saw what little was left of the town. A few stone foundations. A rusted bridge frame. And silence, that kind of deep, endless silence that makes you hear your own heartbeat. In the 1800s, Clay Lick was a small but busy village. The creek-powered mills, and the people who lived here made bricks and pottery from the local clay. But as factories grew elsewhere and the creek began to flood, people slowly moved away. By the early 1900s, the last families left. The floods took most of the buildings. Nature claimed the rest. I parked near the ruins of what looked like a mill, its broken wall half buried in the mud. The air smelled damp and earthy, and the sound of running water echoed softly nearby. I took out my camera and walked toward the bridge, a narrow metal structure stretching over the creek, rusted and worn but still standing. Halfway across, I stopped. The sound of the water changed, it slowed, then deepened, as if something was moving beneath the surface. I looked down. The creek was dark, but I could make out shapes, ripples forming without any wind, spreading slowly outward. And then came a sound. A faint, echoing hum, not mechanical, but human. It was like someone singing, low and wordless, carried by the water. My heart started to race. I listened closer. It wasn't one voice, it was several. Faint, distant, coming from the direction of the ruins. I turned back toward the mill. The air had gone colder. My breath came out in mist. The humming grew louder, turning into something like a chant, old, rhythmic, repeating. And then I saw it, a light moving near the trees. At first, I thought it was someone with a lantern. But it wasn't steady, it flickered like firelight, dancing across the water. I called out, but my voice didn't carry. The moment I spoke, the sound stopped. The creek went silent again. The light vanished. I stood there for a long time, waiting, but nothing else happened. When I finally turned to leave, the bridge creaked beneath my feet, and I heard one last echo, the same humming, so faint it could have been the wind, but I knew it wasn't. Locals say the people who lived in Clay Lick were proud of their work, the builders, the potters, the mill workers, and that on certain nights, when the fog rolls in, you can still hear them singing by the creek. Songs of the old clay town, still carried by the river that took it all away. Number 10 Cheshire, Old Cheshire, Gallia County, Ohio. The first thing you notice about Old Cheshire isn't what's there, it's what's missing. The town is gone. Completely gone. I drove along the Ohio River that afternoon, heading south through Gallia County, and my GPS still showed the name Cheshire. But the town itself, the original one, had been erased from the map. Only a few lonely trees, cracked sidewalks, and the faint outlines of foundations remained. It felt like walking into a memory that refused to fade, even after being forced to disappear. Back in the early 2000s, Cheshire was a small but tight-knit river town. Families had lived there for generations, farmers, shopkeepers, teachers. Life moved slow, simple, and steady. Then came the power plant. The smoke, the ash, and the pollution crept in year after year until the air itself turned heavy. The residents began to get sick. The water tasted different. The sky changed color. And then, one day, it was over. The company offered to buy every home in the village. Almost everyone took the deal, because who can fight something that big? By 2005, the last family was gone. The houses were bulldozed, the streets sealed off, and the town of Cheshire, the old one, was no more. I stood where Main Street used to be, the cracked pavement breaking under wild grass. The wind carried a faint, chemical smell from across the river. The silence was so deep it almost hurt to breathe. Then I noticed something strange, the faint sound of children laughing. It was soft, carried on the wind, coming from the direction of where the old school once stood. I followed the sound, my steps crunching on broken glass and gravel. The laughter grew clearer, sharper, but when I turned the corner, there was nothing. Just the outline of the school's foundation, overgrown with weeds. Then came another sound, a door slamming shut. I turned fast, but every building here was gone. The wind had stopped. The river sounded far away. For a moment, it felt like the whole world had paused. I took out my phone to record, but the battery, fully charged an hour ago, died instantly. Black screen. No signal. And then, in the quiet, came a faint hum, like the low buzz of streetlights. The air shimmered, and for a brief second, I saw it, the ghost of the town. Houses. Porches. Streetlights. All flickering like a reflection on water. And just as suddenly, it was gone. When I left, the river looked still, but I couldn't shake the feeling that Cheshire isn't gone, not really. It's just sleeping beneath the surface, waiting for the day the air clears and the river forgets. They say that on quiet nights, when fog rolls over the Ohio River, you can still see the lights of old Cheshire glowing faintly on the shore, a town that refused to die, even when the world made it disappear.